Okay, everybody, thank you for coming to the Digression Sessions Volume 4. As always, my name is Preston John Anders. Just call me PJ. Well, I have with me today two returning Xanadu Review alumni, returning champions. First off, we have friend of the show, Yakubian Ape. This is, I think we were saying a second ago, our fourth time we've done a podcast together, something like that.
Yes, I believe so.
Mm-hmm. And also we have Monia Ali. We did something together a couple months ago, and it's always nice to talk and interact. So I'm almost positive everybody in the audience knows you since we've done stuff in the past, but just in case we haven't, you guys want to give yourself a quick introduction, like the type of writing you do, and then we'll jump into it.
I'm sorry.
No, I was like,
every time.
Give it a second. You go first.
I'm Monia Ali, and I write Fandom Exile, which is all about fandom and fan culture, stan culture, how industry supports, feeds into it, and all of that stuff.
Yes, and I'm Yakubian Ape. I write about a lot of culture, the intersection with politics, but it's kind of a grab bag. I write a lot about internet history and the paranormal as well, and it's basically whatever catches my attention at any given time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both great blogs, and I always love hearing you guys' different perspectives, which is kind of wanted to get you together early on because I feel like you guys have similar beats but come at it from different angles. So I think we could have some interesting conversations. So excuse me. To kind of get us started, before we started recording, I was talking with Ape about, I don't know if this is something you follow. It doesn't strike me as your type of hangout, but this week, as of recording, 4chan has been hacked and possibly gone forever because it sounds like they leaked the source code, they doxed all the moderators, and that's something that's really hard to come back from for any website, much less something as notorious as 4chan. But we were talking about how, for better or for worse, 4chan was one of the original fandom spaces, and how I'm sure Ape can go into this more, like it was the gestation space of like the brony fandom for one. And funnily enough, the last ever post on 4chan possibly was Chicken Jockey, which I guess is from the Minecraft movie. So it feels like a very kind of apropos bow to be tied on it or period to be put on it. So I guess like either your thoughts on, 4chan going specifically, or, how fandom, online fandom spaces are changing, or the Minecraft movie, because that sounds like that's being like a cultural phenomenon right now. And because everybody was saying like it's going to be terrible slop, but I don't know if it's ironic or people are just like becoming less cynical. But like, yeah, Minecraft is blowing up for some reason.
I mean,
well, sorry, it's going to happen.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay. Well, I was going to say like the whole thing about 4chan that's so funny about it is that I thought it was fitting that it went out not with a bang or a whimper, but with a wet fart and a chicken jockey. And ultimately, is like we were talking about this. You said it reminded you of a friend from your hometown like ODing on drugs, and it's kind of like, his life, he was fucked up, but that's sad, and I still feel a little bad. I compared it to when they got to put your dog down, and you're like, yeah, like we had some good times, I suppose, but it is about that time, and it's probably better to just put it out of its misery. And I think it had outlived its prime, I guess you could say. I don't know, like
cultural moment, cultural relevance.
Yes and no, because like really, I think what killed it was when Moot sold it to the Japanese guy. I can't think of his name.
Yeah,
and after that, the site just became like a shambling corpse of itself pretty quick. And now there's all these
year
people...
that was roundabouts, because I went on 4chan when I was like in high school, pretty much. And this was like, it feels weird. It's like, damn, this was over a decade ago, like late 2000s, very early 2010s, where the internet was a very different place. And this was even pre like mass adoption of Facebook. So things like 4chan and Tumblr were both like more sequestered, but at the same time they had an outsized influence. And like back then, like everything like you think negative about 4chan existed, but it was kind of in like specific boards. So if you didn't want to deal with like the neo-Nazis and whatnot, you could pretty easily avoid it. But I kind of just like lost interest at early 2010s, and this apparently like right before Gamergate happened, and that's when I hear it really went down to shit. And then the 2016 elections and whatnot. So I don't know. I'm curious to like the timeline on that, but every once in a while I would check in, like if they're if people release like a leak, it'll be on 4chan. That's one of the few utilities that it still served, I think, is people would anonymously post a leak or something like that. And whenever I saw it, it's like, wow, this is like you said, it's definitely the old dog that's kind of incontinent and has the milky cataract eyes, so to speak.
Well, and that's the only reason I think it was somewhat of a loss that it's gone, is because 4chan was really like the last holdout of that anonymous Chan culture. And you could think what you want about it. Obviously, it had its issues, a lot of them. But at the same time, it was truly one of the last spaces on the internet that I feel like hadn't been hyper corporatized and couldn't be corporatized. I think Tumblr is probably the other one, but that's just because the user base is so eclectic and so I don't know. Like I always say, Tumblr's basically a retirement home at this point for a bunch of LGBT people who just sit around and shitpost and talk shit with each other. And that also means that it cannot be corporatized because they just absolutely refuse to play by any rules. And it's funny that Tumblr is more like 4chan now than it ever was in the past, I think. But the point is, where I was going is that like it was the last place that couldn't be touched by corporate hands, and with its loss, the internet's gotten smaller, and that's never a good thing.
Yeah, Tumblr. I hang out on Tumblr, and a lot of the stuff that I saw is basically just like those memes of like somehow Tumblr won the social media Cold War. Like it's that meme of like, oh, Luigi did nothing and won by doing nothing. And like,
I'm sure you saw the
total Tumblr victory.
I'm sure if you're on Tumblr, as I am, I've been on there since 2012, I think. And I'm sure you've seen the memes of like, remember back in the day when they used to ironically ship 4chan and Tumblr, and they would have like 4chan represented by the guy with the green mask, and the Tumblr was the mousy glasses girl. Now they're making all these memes of it again. Like I saw one where they had painted over Ilya Repin's Ivan the Terrible holding his son after he
that's what I was going to mention.
And it was like fucking Tumblr holding 4chan crying. And it was I was like, I don't think you guys are being ironic about this anymore. It's like Batman losing the Joker. It's like, what do you do now?
Yeah. Well, no, I'll send a comic that someone did with those two personalizations of the websites in light of the news. But it is definitely
I want to see that too.
It is special. I will say though, I do think you're correct that Tumblr is not corporatized in the classic sense. They did fire all of the support staff apparently recently.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So a lot of people were freaking out. But it is used to sort of scrape information and sort of steer people in certain directions. That sounds so conspiratorial, but like that's what they do a lot with fandom things, right? Because of the anonymous asks and all of that stuff. It is definitely being sort of it is used for information gathering in a way rather than
and
profit.
You've probably noticed this because I certainly have, is like they're, despite having fired like half their support staff, I've never seen more posts wrongly tagged as explicit material. It's like half the stuff on my dashboard is like blurred out, or I have to click to look at it, and I'll open it up and it's like a picture of a car or something, and it's like, why is this explicit material? Like, what the hell triggered that?
I feel like this has been a problem since the beginning, though. Like, because I always had shit being tagged, and I'm like, this is nothing. Like, what are we talking about here? Meanwhile, porn blogs are still following me, even though it's allegedly.
I thought it was banned.
Yeah, allegedly
that
it's
was
banned.
My understanding that like there was a great exodus when they banned porn, and I don't know, maybe it made the site better, but to backtrack really quick, did this happen fairly recently? Because it's interesting that like I've noticed in especially in like the last week, there's been this huge uptick of like bots and spam on Substack.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird that that seems to be happening across multiple social media sites.
Yeah, it happened like last week or something, I want to say, or maybe a bit farther out because time just like has no meaning on Tumblr, but it was definitely recently-ish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure it was like a week or two ago. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that lines up, but it is interesting. You're talking about these comics of like, the Joker / Batman relationship of 4chan and Tumblr. I remember that was like a big, like online flame wars were big back in like the early 2010s, late 2000s, and it does feel like there's a lot of modern culture and politics that's downstream from like the 4chan Tumblr culture wars. But I think
Mhm.
you kind of said the same thing. It is a little bit sad to me in the abstract, either 4chan or what Tumblr was. Like, it makes me miss older internet spaces that were more sequestered and had their own culture. And it does feel like something's lost, because either kind of the same thing with 4chan, like it's a message board, or it was RIP. It was a message board. There's not an algorithm to game. And it sounds like, a lot less so with Tumblr, because it's a blogging site.
Mm-hmm.
So it does make me feel a little bit sad, and I miss that older internet culture that used to exist when it was more niche. And I'm sure both of you had the experience of like, in your youths going to like, random obscure forums and meshes boards that had kind of their own weird little cultures and user bases. And I don't know, it does kind of feel like something has been lost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about that a lot, and this is something I wanted to get Monia's opinion on, actually, because I was thinking about it over the course of the week. I've been writing a lot about Homestuck, right? And I've been doing so much research and revisiting my own times and the material that I have from my time in that fandom space. And I was talking to a friend last night about it, and we were both kind of commiserating on like the state of webcomics, and like he was like, they just don't do it like that anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
not just Homestuck, but like that general time period. Like there were so many just like wild, zany, off the wall, really creative web comics, and most of them never got finished. But where I was going with that is that I saw another post on Tumblr that one of the people I follow has been obsessed with The Pit, which is like a medical
show, yeah.
procedural.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was like, this show's been out for a year, and there's no fan fiction about this character and that character. And fandom is so weak these days, because if this was 2010, there'd be like 300,000 fan fictions of these guys fucking on AO3 by this point. And I was like, she's actually right. Like, that's I noticed that these days, where it's just like the creative output it's a trickle compared to what it used to be, which was like a deluge. And I wanted to, like, is that something that you've noticed in your own spaces and like your own experience?
That's a good question, because I wonder about whether that statement is true, because it can be hard to know what shows will actually generate big fandoms. Like, I will often be very confused about what ships are the big ships and which pairings are the ones that have like a lot. Like, I was looking at the 911 fandom, which lots of people keep getting sucked into that recently. And then I saw a post that was saying like that feeling when you realize that the quote unquote gay show that all your moots are getting sucked into doesn't even have, like, the ship isn't even canon. Like, and I was like, what? It's not? I totally thought it was, based on everything that I've been reading. And it's like, no, it's not canon, but that's like the biggest ship. And there is a canon gay ship in the show, but that's not the one that's like the big deal, right? So it's hard to know. And The Pit feels a bit more like ER. Like, I could be wrong, but it gives me more ER vibes. And ER was not a big fandom show, I don't think.
I don't think so, but it's kind of had like a resurgence, at least with, I mean, I've noticed a lot of people, it's gotten to be one of those shows, at least among people that I am around, like my sister,
Mhm.
she's one of those people who will just go and rewatch like all her favorite sitcoms or whatever, just have it play in the background. And I think like she got into ER recently,
Mhm.
and I was like, God, I remember mom watching that like when I was a kid.
I watched
know?
That's an
all.
old show.
Yeah, I watched all of those seasons. Like, at least now it's been at least a decade
Mhm.
since I watched all of that. But yeah, I totally get that, because it can be fun to sort of watch old stuff, and it's it has a different vibe. Like the quality from back then is very different from the streaming shows these days. So it just
It's
feels
noticeable.
different. Yeah, it's
Well,
so
what I was
noticeable.
the two things that strike me about that is I feel like maybe it was like, I don't know, late 90s, but like really like early 2000s is when the medical procedural was very popular. Like Scrubs was one of my favorite shows ever when I was like, kid, high school. It was, I think it holds up. I was randomly watching clips of it on YouTube because it got pushed into the algorithm for whichever reason. But I would say, like, I mean, I guess maybe that kind of thing just comes and goes. Maybe the medical procedural is, there's still, I don't know, Netflix shows about it that I don't follow. But either that and like, I think something being made for, intended for, being put out in like these, 30 episode seasons or whatever it is versus, and intended to be put into syndication that can be shown out of order versus, the Netflix miniseries where everything is serialized. That's another thing that I feel like has been kind of lost because I was unemployed for about 2 months and I just started a new job. I was just watching a lot of TV. And one of the things I was watching, I don't know if this is either of your thing, but the show Stargate. It doesn't even need to be that specifically, but there's a lost art, I think, to making good serialized TV that can be played out of order. Like maybe you should be at least familiar with the characters and stuff, but a self-contained story in like 45 minutes, I feel like has kind of gone away, and it's its own like good write, because people would like, decry it's just popcorn stuff, and people were wanting the serialized stuff that became popular with Breaking Bad and all that. But there's something to like that really tight writing where there's no fat and you have to tell like a self-contained story in 45 minutes. That's something I miss too.
Yeah, Stargate. Oh man, Stargate has a big fandom stuff. I'm guessing you're missing. You mean the original one, like not Atlantis.
SG1, but also I mean I watched SG1 and Atlantis, but either or, they do. Well, Atlantis was a little bit more serialized, but a lot of it was like Adventure of the Week.
Yeah, they had a massive fandom. Like they had such a massive fandom.
I was a part of it. I liked it. That was they had, which funnily enough, I don't want to because this isn't a Stargate podcast. I don't know how much you guys watched it, but they tried to do one more series because it was like the movie from like the mid 90s, and then the TV show based off of that, and they had the spin-off which was SG1 and the spin-off which was Stargate Atlantis. They tried to do a third series which was Stargate Universe, which was actually I think like a creative idea where they did like more first person confessional type stuff. It was kind of like how a TV show is a bottle episode. It was all on that ship for the most part. And it was serialized. And I think it was like maybe just a little bit before its time, because I feel like that's something that would have done really well on streaming. But at the time, I didn't like it because I would pretty much just see things serialized, random episodes here or there, which something like that doesn't really work if you're just seeing episodes here or there for the most part.
It's interesting because I wonder if the era kind of ended around that time, because I covered the Stargate fan campaigns in my fan campaign posts because it got SG1. SG1 was canceled in its 10th season, which to me, I'm like, that's a solid amount.
Yeah,
I'm
it was
sure
already past its prime in my opinion.
I'm like, I'm sure you're sad to see it go, but like, you got 10 seasons. Like that's a lot, but the uproar was very loud and they were very angry, and they were like, one of the quotes that I had was, now is the time to tell them to save not just Stargate SG1, but themselves. like this network is going to ruin itself by canceling Stargate. Because I think they were comparing it to BSG, because BSG, had fewer viewers, but it was still renewed, and they're like, how dare they? But who knows about budget? Like there's so much beyond viewership in these decisions.
It blew up in budget from what I understand. Also, like it was one of those shows that like, I think I forget exact, like past season 6, it's like, okay, you have done the arc of the story that you want to tell. And if you still like these characters in this universe, you'll keep watching. Kind of like, for me, like Supernatural is a show like that, where the first 5 seasons is a good story. Anything after that, it's like, okay, do you want to watch literal Scooby-Doo shit? Because they did an episode with Scooby-Doo. And it gets very silly after that. I don't know how much you guys. I feel like you guys are both
Oh,
supernatural
I
people.
watched all of it, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I stopped watching after season 8 or something. Whichever one. It's like, oh, they did the Leviathans, which was a cool concept, executed very poorly, and then they did like demons were a big thing against. Yeah, after they killed off Bobby. Spoilers for people who haven't seen this. God,
Rip
it's
Rip
almost
Bobby.
20-year-old series at this point, but after that I kind of fell off.
Yeah, no, that was a show. I remember my girlfriend at the time, like, and we dated for a long time. We watched that whole thing from like beginning to end, and I was just like, why did we do that? And why did I kind of like it?
Oh my God. No, I was gonna say it's interesting that you pointed out season 5 specifically, PJ, because that is when Eric Kripke left.
Yeah, because that's the story he wanted to tell. After that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I did not get into it. I tried because it came out at that time where, like, there are specific shows that I know them from fandom migration, or it's like I'm in a fandom with a bunch of people, the show ends, and you sort of like you hang around, but then something new and shiny comes up and like sort of steals people away. And Supernatural was one of those shows that like sucked away like big parts of my fandom. So I was like, I should try it because all my favorite writers are going to be there. All my friends are going to be there. This could be great. And I still was just like, I'm not feeling it.
Something you should like on paper. I've had a couple of those shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like for me, that's Buffy. Like on paper, Buffy's something that I should like. But it's just maybe we'll get into this. I'm a very, very reluctant Joss Whedon defender, and that's maybe me being a contrarian, but that's Joss Whedon at his most Joss Whedoniest. Whereas like, I think like Firefly is great. I think Cabin in the Woods was a really good movie. I think, for, people have kind of turned against what they call the cape shit now. But I think the first Avengers movie was, very tight script. And say what you will about Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon loves comic books, which is something that can't be said for, I feel like, a lot of the people who are involved with that shit now. So
no, even Buffy was inspired by Kitty Pryde, right? So he was always very, very into his comics. And I think Avengers was kind of his like dream, probably. And it's interesting you mentioned like Firefly was whatever. Like I think Firefly quality wise is the best project he's worked on. And I also don't think it's the most Joss at all. Like I think other people had more say in what was going on there.
Yeah, not everybody's the quippy dialogue banter. There's like one or two, but that's he can get, he's one of those people where like you shouldn't give him full creative control.
Exactly. He needs to be reined in a bit. And it's funny. I feel like I'm a defender of his as well, even though I have so much criticism for him.
Okay.
And
what's your defense then? Because I'll give my defense real quick. Because Ape said he would hear out the defense from me, and my defense is very tacit. Other than like, and I've talked about this before. Of like, I can appreciate and enjoy somebody who's really passionate and not cynical. Say what you will about Joss Whedon, like I feel like a lot of his stuff has aged really poorly in a lot of different ways. But even though it was like snarky and it was snarky but never cynical for the most part. But something like Firefly, really, really good. Maybe hot take, almost better that it got canceled. So
I
we
think
could
so.
remember as
Absolutely.
it was before he Joss Whedon did it up too much.
I've heard stories of what was supposed to happen in season 2, and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. I am so glad that this did not happen. Yeah.
Put a pin in that because I'm interested. But I think Cabin in the Woods is one of the few really good genre deconstructions that exist. Because it's really creative, does something really interesting with genre trappings, and takes it in a different direction you think it's going to go. But also I understand that like he was like involved, but he didn't have full creative control. So
the director and co-writer was why am I blanking on him? Is Drew Goddard, who came on to Buffy in season 7 and got like minions and fans who were like obsessed with him before he even had an episode that aired, which is super weird. But
That is
he did
weird.
have a pretty good writing style. So like, yeah, I think he did
Mhm.
well with Cabin.
Well,
I don't
I
like his
think-
other movies.
I think that one scene where whatever all the monsters break out and they're killing all the soldiers, that's like one of the coolest horror movie. I don't even know if you can call it horror because it's really not scary.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, isn't there like, if I remember correctly, there's like a part where like a unicorn like stabs a
Mhm.
guy, like gores him with a horn.
Mhm.
So it's not like really scary, but it's just campy bullshit fun. I love that scene. I that's a pretty
Yeah.
good movie.
I like that it
Yeah.
deconstructs the genre in a great way and sort of calls out the audience. Now, as I'm saying that, I'm like, that sounds like a annoying thing to do, but I also feel like
Mhm.
they do it
But
well.
they did it well.
Yeah.
Well, I
Well-
like anything that I shouldn't like on paper, but I end up like because I'm cards on the table. I don't really like horror that much as a genre.
Mhm.
Basically for the reason that like the movie criticizes to me, like there's and the horror fans in the audience are probably going to get mad at me for saying this, but at least from what I've seen, you have like slasher type stuff, which I don't like gratuitous gore. Some good psychological stuff because I've seen a few that I've liked, like Rosemary's Baby, I think was really good, or anything with like jump scares. Like the first time you get me with a jump scare, and then I'm expecting it. So I don't like a lot of that stuff, or all the like the horror movie cliches that we all grew up with that they parodied. But I think they did something really interesting there. So
Yeah.
Well, and the thing about I think that works with Cabin in the Woods, and this goes back to Joss Whedon being like just a pretty sincere creative, is that I wrote about this in another piece of all things Digimon because the third season of Digimon was like they hired this horror
man.
author to write it. And he was a really weird choice for a kid's show, but it worked really well. And the whole thing is because, he had a sincere passion for these weird gonzo off the wall kind of like deconstructions. That's what he did well. But the reason that works and the reason Cabin in the Wood works and the reason that there are good deconstructions because that's become like the University of Reddit Media Literacy Award term is deconstruction, like, oh, we're subverting audience expectations. No, like a lot of these deconstructions, like the new Star Wars movies, the reason they don't work as deconstructions is because the people don't respect the source material.
Mhm.
You
or
can't
even
say that about
understand it.
Joss Whedon. Has a sincere affection for these movies when he's deconstructing it. Like he understands why they work and he understands how to deconstruct it in an interesting way that somebody who doesn't respect the source material wouldn't. I think it was Mel Brooks, and I brought this up in the article, said like you can't make fun of something unless you like it. You really can't have fun with it if you don't respect it. And
Yeah.
the other thing about Joss Whedon though, and I don't know if I told you this because you did that was on one of the you reblogged the Jack Black thing about
Mhm.
and you were talking about Joss Whedon and defending him, and it got me thinking though, and I don't know if I replied with this, but the thing about Joss Whedon is like you may not like his shtick, but again I was rereading Homestuck and I realized the reason that the newer projects under the Homestuck banner don't work is because Andrew Hussey, the author, is a lot like what's his name, Joss Whedon, and in the fact like you may not like their shtick, but they do it really well.
Mhm.
And all the
And they
people
have a
they've
shtick?
influenced are the what was that?
I said, and they have a shtick. It's
Yeah.
it's recognizable.
Yeah, and they do it really well. And it's not their fault that all these people tried to ape them and couldn't
Mhm.
do it as well. It's one of those things where they're often imitated but never replicated. And the issue really isn't like Hussey or Whedon's writing itself. It's the fact that people have been trying to do that again and kind of capture their spark, and they just don't do it nearly as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was
So can I-
asking.
Go ahead. I
Sorry.
just want to do one quick anecdote before I forget about that. Because as far as like the deconstruction thing goes, I don't know if you guys know the author Brandon Sanderson.
Yes.
Yeah, so he talks about and specifically in the context of what was the movie The Last Jedi and audience expectations in general. He's like, there's two different ways that you can approach it. And he was teaching a class, so it's his opinion, obviously. But dealing with audience expectations, He's like, okay, it's like I'm going to give my son a Christmas present. And he said he really wants a remote control car. And the two things you can do that are interesting is like, okay, I will get him the remote control car, and on Christmas morning, he will open up his present, he'll get a remote control car, and he'll be really happy. Or the other thing you could do is say, yep, I'll get you a remote control car, but you spend, the weeks and months leading up to Christmas talking about how cool remote control airplanes are, and how it would be cool to fly, and you're putting that in the in his son's head. And then on Christmas morning, he gets the remote control airplane. It's not the car he wanted, but it's like, ooh, this is also cool. Whereas, like, to me, what The Last Jedi did was like, giving you an empty box and telling you, like, saying you're entitled and a piece of shit for wanting something to be in the box, and that Christmas is stupid.
Yeah, that's a pretty good comparison, I think.
Yeah. And quick, I want to put a pin in Digimon Season 3. So fucking good.
Oh, yes.
We'll get back to that. But Monia, what were you gonna
say? Great question. What was I going to say? I don't know. I don't think I remember.
We were talking about Joss Whedon and like how he's not really the issue, but all the people who've been trying to ape his shtick and don't do it as well, and that's why it got so annoying.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yes. Like, let's like getting mad at Rage Against the Machine for Limp Bizkit,
That's exactly where I was going. Not specifically Rage Against the Machine, but this was something I had been thinking about, where we're always like, oh, this thing ruined something. And I'm like, but those things usually come from somewhere else. So I had asked my friend, like, what's a band that is actually good, but caused like a descent into like awfulness? And she was like, maybe Nirvana. And I'm like, that could be a good call, actually, because they set off the grunge, money pit. I don't know if that's the right term, but you know what I mean? Like it caused like this big thing. And then, Rage Against the Machine could easily be traced like towards Limp Bizkit and all of those new metal bands. And I think Buffy and Joss definitely did that in the vampire genre. Like Vampire Diaries completely stole so many plots from the show, so that people who watch Buffy now, who watch those, are like, oh, this is what happened with Stefan. Oh, wait, this scene was basically in Legacies. Like, wait, what? These are all like straight up lifted from the show. And Twilight, I don't think Twilight would have really happened. A lot of bad things came out of it. And then it even affected the comic book movie world and, all of that, the sort of quippy dialogue.
Soy banter, as they call it. Yeah.
No, it's funny you bring that up too, because like I remember when Twilight was huge, right? That was around the time that True Blood came out on HBO, and my dad was really into that, and my mom didn't really like the show, but she started reading the books, and I read the books because she had them all, and I'm just read anything I could get my hands on, and I had already read the first Twilight book just to give it a fair shake. I mean, like, you got to understand, I was in high school. Every boy was like legally mandated to fucking hate it. But I was like, maybe there's something to it. Maybe it's not that bad. And I can't say it was good, but one of the things I noticed when I was like reading the Southern Vampire Mysteries or whatever they were called, is I was like, wait a second, Bill is a Confederate veteran from Texas who turns into a vampire. I was like, that's Edward's brother's backstory. Like, this is like, and Stephanie Meyer says, oh, it came to me in a dream. And I was like, yeah, after you fucking read the True Blood books, maybe. Like, be honest. Come on.
And watch Buffy. Like, there's just so much. Like, Edward is also basically Angel, kind of.
Interview with the Vampire seems very influential on that, too, because that's another Southern vampire Confederate.
Yeah.
I wonder why that's such a big trope.
Well, maybe Anne Rice started it.
Look, Anne Rice is from New Orleans. You go to the New Orleans in the French Quarter at night, and you will believe, like, if there are going to be vampires anywhere in this country, it's going to be there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Louisiana is just a creepy place.
Yeah, I have family I haven't been there since I was a kid. That like swampy feel, like as soon as you go outside, like you could have just stepped out of the shower, you go outside and you feel like you need another. So there's something very haunted feeling about
I mean, my friend lived in Baton Rouge for a while, and I spent a lot of time out there. Like, I lived with them for about 3 months, and it was just one of those places where it's like once you get outside, like, it gets rural, and it gets rural fast, and it's just these dense, dark swamps. It's like it's just charged. Like, there's bad energy there, man.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying. That sounds terrifying. They should have had CSI Louisiana, and they would have gotten some pretty crazy crime scenes, I bet.
Yeah.
On the topic of Joss's like influence, I wonder, how do you guys feel about Gilmore Girls doing something similar because of the dialogue and like the weird
Yeah.
snappy?
That
I
is
feel-
a complete blind spot for me. I've never
I've
watched
seen
Gilmore Girls.
I've seen it twice. My wife probably more than it's one of those things like my wife really likes. I've watched it probably at least 3 times. Like I don't like the show, but I've seen it enough that I have really strong opinions on it. Like fuck Lorelai, she's an annoying woman child. Her mom did nothing wrong. Rory was more emotionally developed than her mom by like age 14.
But
yeah,
did you
no, I
watch
know.
all of it? Did you watch the revival as well? Because I
Yeah,
would
it
challenge
was-
your Rory opinion based on
Yeah,
where they
it
went.
feels like almost a retcon. Either that or like,
Yes.
she's the gifted kid who like goes out into the real world and, couldn't hack it because she's
every
from this-
millennial
pretty much.
who
And
was
like,
told they were amazing and so smart and could do anything, and then they're like, "Oh wait, the real world doesn't
you
want
want to,
me."
didn't she want to be like a journalist or something?
Yeah, she wanted to be a Christiane Amanpour, and
It's
yeah,
such a fucking NPR show. I
And she-
swear.
at the end of the series, spoiler alert, she
Mhm.
leaves to be a journalist following Obama's election campaign.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it is very yeah, I feel like this is like the id of the millennial woman, like in the same way that like
Probably.
we saw like either like for guys it was either like some Joss Whedon show or like Mad Men, because I've
Yes.
actually heard like and not to go too much on a Gilmore Girls tangent,
Yeah,
there's
sorry.
like a fan. No, we'll do other stuff too. Because I want to talk about Digimon season 3 still. But like there's a fan theory that Lorelai like got in a car accident or something. Like this is all like a coma dream for her, because basically like the whole world totally revolves around her. She's like a woman in her 40s who still has this like teenage girl relationship with her mom, and like every single man either like is a masculine stereotype that falls in love with her or her daughter who she's obviously living through, or like kind of effeminate and castrated. And it's I have like I said, I have a lot to say about Gilmore Girls, even though I don't really like it, but
I feel like we could have a whole conversation.
We'll
But I will
do-
say she is in her 30s, though. I will say that.
oh, okay.
I feel
That's
like
the
you
whole
should
point.
do. I feel like you should do an article on it, like you did the Venture Bros.
Okay. I might give it a try.
That would be really
But,
interesting.
I
That
do.
would be-
Yeah, it's like, for all the boyfriends who have had to watch Gilmore Girls support group type of thing.
It's funny because I do actually really love the show, but I have I disagree with a lot of the fandom on a lot of things, like who's the best boyfriend or whatever. But I think it just illustrates how
Dean, by the way, Dean is the correct answer.
I really like Dean, and I think he was retconned pretty shittily by the end. So for that, I'll always have a soft spot for him, because I think he was fine until they sort of like messed him up.
Well, I have a soft spot because he's from Supernatural. Also, like as a side
He
note,
started
just,
in
like,
Gilmore Girls.
yeah, true. Well, also, like he came back for later seasons and episodes here or there, but that's when he was in Supernatural and he like bulked up
rough.
insanely. Yeah, man, that guy got huge.
Wait, so okay, hold on. Like I said, I have never seen Gilmore Girls. Fortunately, no girl I've ever dated was into it, so I never had to watch it. But you're telling me that Jensen Ackles was in it?
No,
Jared
confusingly- Yeah, Jared Padalecki's character is named Dean.
You said Dean, and I was like,
Dean
oh,
is
so
the
it means
name
like-
of the
His
character.
name Dean.
Yeah, Jared
Oh, wow,
Padalecki plays Dean in Gilmore Girls.
Okay.
But
You
yeah,
know,
I
I
mean, look
actually
at
saw him. I actually saw him while I was filling up in Austin. He looked like he was about to kick my ass, and then a week later, he got arrested for brawling on 6th Street. So good thing I
Well,
didn't say anything.
because there's no way that guy's not on steroids. He's got to be roid raging. Because if you look at him like in Gilmore Girls or the very beginning of Supernatural, he's a tall guy. Because you think Jensen Ackles is short, but he's like 6'2" or something like that. He's a tall, skinny guy.
He's very, very tall. Yeah.
He
Well,
got
and-
just roided out because he's like insanely jacked.
Well, it's funny too because like I've always heard that Jensen Ackles is like a super nice guy if you catch him. Like, again, I lived in Austin. They both live in Austin. People saw him all over the place, and apparently Jensen Ackles is pretty nice. But Jared Padalecki, apparently, like my cousin actually worked with him on a show. She's the what do you call it? Some sort of she works in the film industry, and she worked out in Austin on what was it, Texas Walker Texas Ranger revival
Yeah.
that he was in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, he's kind of a dick.
That's funny because Jensen is the one that's like hated by the fan base.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't, paint it so broadly because I don't think it's like all the fans, but the Tumblr fans, I will say, like kind of have a problem with him. They think he's homophobic. Because
Yeah, I remember
know,
somebody
reasons.
telling me something about like, some fan asked him a question about a gay ship or something, and he was like, "I'm not going to answer that."
Mhm.
Wasn't that basically the
Yeah, he's
impetus
not
behind it?
entirely on board with Destiel, which is the Dean Castiel
Mm-hmm.
relationship, which means he's homophobic. And this is a very standard fandom approach, which I hate, by the way, which is like, oh, if you don't like my ship, then and it's a same-sex ship, then you're clearly homophobic.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you deny that you're dating this person that I think you might be, then you're homophobic.
Yeah. Say my fan fiction is real, or you're a bigot, basically.
Essentially, yeah.
This
yeah.
is an actor and not a writer. well, speaking of like the like I guess insane fan stuff. Speaking of like the Eric Kripke shows, I remember
Mhm.
the what's her face? She was in The Boys. Asha Cash, something like that. She played like the neo-Nazi, I guess technically Nazi superhero. And this actress is Jewish, and people were harassing her on Twitter for being a Nazi when like it is a character she is playing and she is Jewish.
I think it's an
And-
actress I really like, actually. And I haven't
Yeah,
watched
something Cash, I think. She plays Stormfront.
Ava.
Something Cash. I'm pretty sure.
Was she in the show You're the Worst, which is great, by the way?
I've not seen it. Let me just
because I think that's her. You're the Worst.
Aya Cash.
Yes, Aya Cash. Yeah. That's right. I like her.
I mean, she was one of the better parts of that show, The Boys.
Yeah.
I think season 2 was like the last season that I actually watched it, and I was like, I kind of liked it even a little bit because after that, it just became like a self parody.
Yeah. Are you a fan of The Boys, Monia? Because I feel the same way as Ape. Like it was an interesting concept that it became kind of like, in the way you talk about like Joss Whedon.
Mhm.
It's good when he's involved but not total control, but it became like very, very Eric Kripke, super, super, super duper edgy. Like The Boys is already an edgy comic, but like it got a little bit silly and, I don't know.
Yeah,
it kinda got away from me.
I liked season 1. I think I watched some of season 2. Like, I don't hate it, but I was just like, okay, it's not really like what I wish to spend my time on. But I've read the criticisms, and I know people that really, really love it still. So I listen to what they have to say. Like, I just try to take I take the criticism and I take what the people that really like it say, and I'm just like, okay, try to make a full picture of it without seeing it. It is interesting because of all the discourse, if nothing else, because it really does generate a lot of that.
Well, I mean, I think that showed too, like the interesting discourse around it, I think, was the fact that it kind of seemed like the flashpoint for a lot of this discussion of like, no, he's the villain. You're not supposed to like him with Homelander, where it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
no shit, he's the villain. Like, that's why we like him, is because like Anthony Starr, I think his name is,
Yeah.
man, fucking steals the show every scene he's in as Homelander. I mean, he's incredible.
I mean,
And I was like, I just want to watch the show about him, quite
Yeah.
frankly. And
Well,
I know
that's-
he's a bad guy, but
like you said, it's
you
the
know.
Reddit media literacy thing where like it's so obvious where people I had a coworker that I not exactly love-hate relationship because I didn't think about him that much, but he was very much like your typical Reddit media literacy, like, oh, this is parodying corporate culture and conservative. It's like, yeah, no shit, he's literally wearing an American flag and they work for a corporation. This ain't exactly like really deep analysis you're doing. But at the same time, or is I going with that? Yeah, I feel like he's like Homelander is the most interesting character, and also in some ways the most likable because we were talking about like everybody being quippy and ironic, and like especially with that show, everybody is like, doing their little quips and their soy banter. Homelander is the only character in the show, The Boys, that takes the boy seriously, and that's part of the reason why he's so scary. So, speaking of which, I have a topic I want to throw to you guys is between like Homelander or the Joaquin Phoenix Joker or Kylo Ren or the new Captain America that wasn't Captain America. I didn't see that one from Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You're seeing like this phenomenon, kind of like you mentioned, of we're trying to make this character the villain, but everybody loves them the most, and the writers get mad at it and try to like counteract it. And it, like specifically with the Joker too, which is an insane situation. Didn't see that one, but I'm kind of kicking around, maybe at some point writing an article called the Kylo Ren effect, where this is kind of what you see, not unlike how like you used to see like, gay coded characters or like, colors who are black or something like that. And because they make them the villain, they're the only interesting one there. But now like, you see like, Kylo Ren or Homelander, all these people. I'm wondering your thoughts on that. And
Ooh,
I'm going to
I
step
have a
out.
lot of thoughts.
Yeah. Start talking. I just need to go let my dogs out. I'll be right back, but jump into it, please.
Yeah, so I would wonder, I kind of would differentiate between some of those characters, and I don't know if that's just me not being aware enough of like the Joker discourse or the boys discourse, but I feel like Kylo Ren is more in the Spike from Buffy trend where he is a bad character, and it's not that people like him, it's that they think he's actually good. Like, it's not like I love a villain, it's like I love a villain, but he's also like actually secretly good, and he's going to be redeemed, and it's going to prove me right, and he's going to be saved, and I can change him situation, where a lot of the Kylo Ren fans feels like in the same vein as like the Spike fans that were like, he will be redeemed and he's actually the greatest character of all time because he is actually good ultimately. Whereas I don't know that Joker fans and Homelander fans, like, or Breaking Bad, like Walter fans who love, how crazy he is. I don't think that they're like, he's actually secretly really good, or are they? Like, have I just missed that discourse?
I think you're right, because I don't ever see anybody saying that the Joker and Homelander are actually good. I will say that Walter White, there are a lot of people who like, one of the stupidest things about the Breaking Bad discourse that's been around the fandom forever is like, oh, Skylar White, she's a bitch. And I was like, dude, like, why? Why is she a bitch? She's objectively in the right here through the whole thing. And
well, not near the. I would challenge you on near the end, where like once she like gets
she joins
in on the crime,
right?
yeah, she does. She becomes a part of it, and then she's still like shitty about it. It's like, well, you're also doing the crimes. But yeah, up until that point, and she was kind of forced into it, I would say. But
yeah,
well, but the whole point is like, there's a lot of people like who, well, they say that Walter White's good, no, but they'll also go through all sorts of mental gymnastics to try to like justify what he does.
You're right.
And it's like, homie was poisoning a 10-year-old kid with rice, and I don't think that's you don't justify that.
That's such a good point, and I wonder if that's one of the few examples that I can think of, like probably not that actually exists, because I think that's a lot of male viewers that did that. Like, I feel like most of the times it's female viewers that do the like, I can change him thing, or like, he'll change for me, like he'll be redeemed ultimately. Whereas Walter White, I think, had a lot of guys that were like, yeah.
He's one of those very, well, I think with Walter White or the Joker or was the other one we were saying, Homelander, it's a very like edgy male kind of like, I mean, Joker is already like the best example of like, you want to be kind of chaotic and irredeemable.
Does Don Draper fit into this as well?
I think to a degree, yeah. Because I mean,
to a degree, I'd say the other one is like Thomas Shelby from what
Peaky
show?
Blinders?
Yeah. Where he's like also a bad dude with a bit of a sensitive side, I suppose you could say. Who like he's kind of sympathetic, but at the same time he's objectively a bad guy. And he kind of reflects that. It is a very male power fantasy. Like, that's what Breaking Bad and all this stuff is. It's just saying, like, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to get what I want, and I don't give a shit who I hurt in the process. And most men will reach a point in their life where they kind of feel that way. And, you can sympathize with the characters, but also when you're in a better headspace and you're not, like, depressed or feeling worthless or whatever, you got to draw back and be
Mhm.
like, no, maybe I'm not going to go sell meth. Maybe there are better ways to deal with my problems than
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. And I won't say this is a male problem at all, because I don't mean because like I said, the girls are the ones that are like, I can change him. But there's definitely like Hannibal and Killing Eve are two shows with like psychos that the girlies love to cheer for as well, and are
Mhm.
cheering for a romance where they're gonna sail off into the sunset together, and it's like they're psychotic serial killers. Like, what are you talking about? What? Like, they're like, no, but they'll be happily ever after. And it's like, I'm concerned for
Yeah,
you. Like, I'm concerned.
it's a weird dynamic where, because I don't think there's anything wrong with just power fantasies sometimes.
Mhm.
Also, like, I mean, this is maybe another part of the conversation. I don't think, and it's something that I've noticed more and more, that like maybe it's an online fandom thing. Like, not every character needs to be likable and redeemable.
Yes.
They just need to tell an interesting story. But
Yeah.
there's this
Yeah.
weird like codependent dynamic with, I feel like, men and women with these types of media, that like you both kind of don't want to admit. Like, it's, I mean, that's kind of like a certain type of like toxic male female relationship, of like the guy being like an unavailable asshole, but obviously he's acting up to get female attention and get somebody to pay attention to him, and she gets to save him. Like, I just read this today that, like, funnily enough, the screen, I think it was like the screenwriter of the American Psycho movie adaptation was a woman, and she was
Yeah,
like,
two
oh,
women.
I want to be in the movie as one of the women that Patrick Bateman has sex with, he kills. It's like, ooh, it's not that hard to read into that, like this weird dynamic that exists, but we also don't want to admit that that's something that is attractive in heterosexual relationships, at the very least, in like the abstract, that kind of like, I can save him, and like, oh, I'm a dark, edgy Joker badass, and I'm looking for my Harley Quinn. And it's always the worst fucking people in the world who
Yes.
do this in
Yeah.
real life. But you can have a little bit of a power fantasy as a treat. That's what media is for, really, right? Storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And I've always said, like, it's okay to have these fantasies. Like, it's okay to watch Breaking Bad and be like, God, I wish I could blow up a drug dealer's den or something, just to, blow off some steam. Or, think like, oh yeah, that psychopath is really hot and I'd love to go out with them on a date. I wouldn't go out on a date with Hannibal Lecter. I'd be afraid, like, what happens when he gets the munchies.
Well, you just, as long as you're not rude, you should be fine,
Mhm.
because he
There
only
you
eats
go.
the rude.
But the whole thing is, like, it's okay to have those fantasies. I think we all have, like, as Kanye would say, my beautiful, dark, twisted fantasies. Just
Mhm.
don't act on them.
Yeah. And the guy
Like,
from You, I feel like, is also another big one, where the stalker killer in You has like a shit ton of fans, and he's like, stop it.
Yeah, it's I guess I have a question for you, because you're you are a lady, and you're in these female centric fandom spaces.
Mhm.
What do you think because I mean, I feel like the male power fantasies are pretty obvious, like Walter White, Conan the Barbarian, Don Draper, etc. Because it seems to be equal parts um being able to like give in to like these these dark characters when it's the heterosexual romance, but like the female version is like being like this very Gone Girl, or what's that actress who plays Jessica Jones, like every character she's ever played.
Kristen Ritter.
Um,
Yeah, Kristen Ritter, like every character she has ever played. It seems to be like those are the two that I see, and like just taking a male power fantasy and making it a woman doesn't seem to track with women quite as much from what I've seen. I feel like that's something that more often than not, like, sounds good in a boardroom, but that's not necessarily women's power fantasy. Or am I off base there?
No, I think you're right, and I think it's very hard to say, because fandom, like, I don't want to be the person that cries misogyny and everything, but there is a very interesting, statistically, it is very interesting how underrepresented female characters are in fandom spaces. Like, they are often dismissed, ignored, hated, in favor of the male characters, who will get paired together oftentimes. Which is weird when you think about like how many straight girls are in fandom. It's like, why wouldn't you want like a straight couple that you can sort of self-insert into? But it's
So
like
they'd
we
rather
hate
do
that
gay?
one.
Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
It-
Oh
I
yeah.
wonder if that's like a like younger women, like a sexual immaturity thing. Because I think of I think of it as like an adolescent male thing to fetishize lesbians. But now that you mentioned, I have one of my friends. I don't really use Twitter/X, but I checked in just to, I was using it. I still followed her, and she's an ostensibly heterosexual woman, and she like posts and not restacks, retweets, I guess. Yeah, I never use Twitter, so I guess that's my shorthand. But all this like gay slash fiction of the TV show Metalocalypse. So, but she was someone, I don't want to put a friend on blast, but she doesn't listen to this. Kind of like she's my age, but just kind of like mentally immature. So I'm wondering if that's the case, or you were shaking your head no, that it's not like a sexual immaturity. Like I want to be with a man, but I can't really like rock that yet.
I don't think so, because there is a lot of older women involved. I mean, I'm one, so like I'm in fandom, and I'm not a young teen. And there's also a lot of lesbians that really like male slash. So I don't know if it's that. Like, there's multiple theories, because, and I think there's no single answer for all of it. But some of it I think can be immaturity and internalized misogyny, in the sense that when they hear about a straight ship, they're like, that's gross. I don't want to read about that. Like, I don't want to read about lady parts. And it's like, but you are a lady. And they're like, I'm disgusted just thinking about it. And it's like, okay, that feels like maybe there's something there that we should be asking questions about, but this is not the space for it. And then there's the other idea that perhaps it is an equality fantasy where, like, if it's a male female couple, then inherently there's expectations of like the male is going to be dominant and the female is going to be submissive, and like one person is penetrated, yada yada. Whereas if it's two guys, suddenly it's like, well, they can take turns. There's no actual like expected, like they might have to figure out amongst themselves, like if someone is going to be dominant and someone is going to be submissive, or is it going to be more equal? But there is also a lot of heteronormativity that is present in a lot of those slash couples. That makes me question my idealistic idea that that's what drives some people, because they're pretty happy to sort of feminize one of the guys extremely, and like make him very small and dainty, and he loves dresses and lingerie, and the big guy is just so like protective. And I'm always like, are these characters even remotely related to the actual characters? Like, I don't think so. And in those cases, maybe it's younger people, or I'm just, talking out of my ass. I'm not sure. Yeah, it is something that I think about a lot, though, because I'm like, I want to understand what drives it. Like, why is this so interesting to, the majority?
Well, and I think part of it in my own, thoughts on, because I've ruminated on that a lot too, because in a lot of the fandoms I've been a part of, obviously the slash ships are the big ones, and I always wondered like why it is that people got so invested in that and why they were so popular, when they could say like, oh, these two guys are like, I think it's something, part of it, and maybe this is a very small factor, but I do think it does play a part in it, is like there is just, Americans have a weird thing about males showing affection towards each other. Like, I grew up with the same group of guys from elementary school to high school and college and all this stuff, and my girlfriend at the time always called us like the gayest straight guys ever, because like we would be laying on the couch like sprawled out on each other, we'd lean up against each other and shit, sleep in the same beds when we went to conventions. Like we really didn't care, because it's like we all know where we stand, we know that, but and one of the big things is, even today, like my newer friends and my new place that I live, I always tell them, last night, hell, we were at the bars, and I walked my friend back to his car, and I was like, love you, brother, love you, hugging all over each other. And the whole thing is, I feel like that's something that a lot of people, both men and women, don't experience and don't see, because I grew up in the time of no homo, where everything was like, oh, no homo, no homo. And it's like, you shouldn't have to say that. You should be allowed to express your philias for your bros without worrying about that stuff. And I feel like, to go back to my own experience when it comes to Homestuck, again, sorry, I've been writing about it and it's been the fandom of my study recently. But it was always like Dave and Carcat was like the huge ship, right? And my thing is like people be like, oh look, they're flirting with each other, and I'm like, no, they're just having like bro banter. They're like sitting on the couch, like just shooting the shit. Like you don't know what it looks like to have a homie that you can just really sit down and jive with. And I feel like that's a big part of it. Is a lot of people mistake perfectly normal like male interactions, healthy male interactions, where we're not like have our guards up and are afraid of being labeled as gay. And we just don't understand what actual philios looks like. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stuff that does have like homoerotic charges to it, I suppose you could say, that are done on purpose in some cases. Like I will say one of the things about the Destiel ship is like I feel like the writers really were dangling that in front of the fans' faces at times. Like that wasn't a misinterpreted thing. I think that was a
No,
pretty
isn't it?
bad case.
Isn't it
They
canon?
leaned into it later. If I recall correctly, like at the very end of the show,
At the
he was
very
like,
end, yeah.
I love you. But at
Yes.
least for what
And
I
it's a
saw,
meme on Tumblr
yeah,
now. It's like I
season
love you, and it's like
1
something else.
yeah, season 1 through 8, I didn't see it, but I think that's one of those shows where like the more it went, like it wasn't for general audiences anymore. It was for the fans, and I feel like it's it becomes like a feedback loop. That the writers are aware of the fandom and they start writing for the fandom. Because at least what I saw, I didn't see any particular subtext, but I've seen clips and heard that later on that it became more of a, and maybe Abe could speak to it more, but also that kind of makes me think of it. And I'll throw it back to you because you look like you're about to say something. But
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
let me say this as a primer because I think it's going to be related. Because kind of in the same way you're talking about this probably like internalized misogyny that some women feel in these contexts. And there's like I'll probably also internalized homophobia for guys like, oh, I just I like my buddy Ape. I'll give him a hug if I see him in real life ever. That's not weird, but the other side of it being that I think they're especially with, and maybe it's not, maybe I'm completely wrong. I thought it was like younger women were like on one level like, oh, guys, show your feelings and stuff like that. But also it's like this fetishization of male friendship that exists. Like I can give a guy a hug without it being gay. Like you could be even like gay guys who just are
and
platonic
real
friends.
quick to add on to that, and this is kind of what I was trying to get at, like the whole point, and it slipped my mind at the time, is that English has one word for love, right? And I always go back to the Greeks, which had like 4 or 5 different words for different types of love. And love is a very, like, the love you feel towards your friends is different than the love you feel towards your family versus your partner, right? And like the Greeks had words for all that and we don't. So I think like because it all gets lumped into that one word, there's a lot of confusion in English speaking countries about like what love can be between different groups of people. Like we kind of all know it, but a lot of people just don't have the vocabulary to articulate it. And when you don't have a word for it, can you really understand it? That's, I guess, what I was getting at.
I think that's
sense.
that's a fair comment. 100%. No, for Supernatural, I was going to ask, when did Castiel, I almost said when did Destiel, when did Castiel join the show? What
like
season?
Season 3.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty early on.
So maybe this has been disproven by a bunch of meta and analysis, but my thought has always been that they introduced him because they were tired of the brothers being shipped, because that was the big ship. And I can see this was a show on the WB, right? It started on the WB, ended on the CW. And I can see them being like, oh, wait, why are we made them brothers? Like, why are you shipping them? Like, that's weird. And I think they were like,
too early for I mean, because that show started in like, God, I was in middle school. Yeah, I don't know. You would probably know better. Do you think like people were trolling the fandoms even then? Because to me, like, it's a WB show, and like, I guess that would be like 2005 and 2006.
Yeah, it's not trolling the fans. I think it's giving them an alternative.
Sorry, not trolling as in like I'm trying to annoy you, like trolling, like you're trawling and trying to keep it like like in a boat. That was not the right word. keeping tabs on it is what I should have
Keeping
said.
tabs. I think they were because they were on LiveJournal, and a lot of my research into like fan influencing goes back to like the late 90s, where they would be going to forums and chats, like fan chats and stuff like that, to sort of steer them in certain directions and sort of hire fans to do certain influencing. So I think that started quite early on. And I think as well, like that was kind of on the heels of Buffy, which is also a very online show where there was a very large amount of interactions with the fan base. And I think it's probably just uncomfortable to know that your two main characters, your brother characters, are somehow like the ship. And whenever a woman was introduced, they were like, we hate her. Like, she needs to go away. And because Supernatural has had like a massive impact on fandom. The Omega-verse was created by Supernatural fandom, and it also helped normalize real person fiction by fans, I believe, who were not comfortable with the incest ship, but liked the two actors together. So they were like, I'll just ship Jared and Jensen instead, essentially. And they had pin hats that believe that they are actually dating as well, which happens in like every single real person ship. It's so funny to me when people single out specific ones and like, those people are crazy. I'm like, you realize this is the case for like every single real person ship.
Mhm.
There's people that believe it's real. Like it's not like one ship that has like crazy conspiracists. Like they're there for every single one. But maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe they didn't know and they just happened to look into it and like see the numbers dip, because then I think Destiel sort of, I think, became much bigger than.
Well, I know with that particular character, Castiel, I know they made him. He was supposed to be a one-off that was popular with fans. So I don't know about that, but sorry, real person ship. I'm guessing it is what it sounds like on the tin, because it. I mean, is that? I guess it's not new, right? Because I know people would say that about
no, it's been a thing for a long time.
Yeah, like the X-Files, what's his name? David Duchovny and what's her face?
Gillovny's,
Gillian
yes.
Anderson.
Yeah, Gillian Anderson.
Gillovny fans, yes.
Yeah, so
Gillovny truthers are definitely a thing.
That's got to be so weird and uncomfortable to be an actor, because I don't know about you guys, but like even like for the small platform that I have, even like just writing and doing a podcast, like part of the reason I'm pseudonymous is like that something like that would make me feel so uncomfortable. Not that it would ever happen to me, but like imagining being an actor, like people like, because you basically become a fictional character even if you're a real person. So that would weird me out way too much.
It's funny you say that, because Catherine D said in a recent chat, she was like, "Oh, I would love people to write fan fiction about me."
She was a bit of an edge case in a lot of different things, I think.
Yes.
Look, if I see anyone writing PJ and Yakubian Ape / fiction, send it to me. I would be curious what that would look like, but also you're a freak.
Yeah, honestly, same. I just want to see, like, what do they say?
I want to,
like, who do they? I just want to see. It's one of those things, like, to see what people think about you. Like, if I were to, like, I don't know, the comments I've gotten, or when people DM me, have been mostly positive. But like, if I were to like write something and have it get bigger, like I don't think I could read the comments, just because, if I ever had like a viral post, like, ooh, I don't know, just to see what, like, people who are outside of your bubble think about you is a little scary to me.
Every time I've seen a post that goes viral on Substack and I see the comments, I'm like, this is unhinged, and I'm scared of this ever happening to me.
I completely agree. I mean, whenever one of my pieces gets like, breaks containment, I suppose, like escape velocity and gets out into the wider Substack, it's like being in a little dinghy in the ocean, and you're like, what the fuck was that just went under my boat? Like there is an entire ecosystem of like people out there that I am completely unaware of that inhabit this site. It's just bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, I think like that speaks to both, our experiences as like, writers, creators, podcasters, and also just the fandom. Because like for me, recently, I crossed 1,000 subs. I was like, wow. When I first started doing this about a year ago, I was like, wow, if I could get to 500 in a couple years, that would be amazing. And I feel like, for the most part, it's been to a specific audience, specific people that I interact with regularly. But everyone, I've had a couple things now that have, kind of like Ape said, it gets to a wider audience that's not your intended audience that you interact with and it's intended for. And it definitely made me think about this because, you don't necessarily, I mean, I'm sure, some people obviously want it, but there's something for me that makes me feel kind of uncomfortable about it. And kind of in the same way I would imagine, like, if you're writing for a fandom and if something like really blows up, then I feel like it would change the way that you write and how you market and everything. And I don't know, I think it would be a weird experience.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I kind of feel like that's what it was like when I got exiled. Was like a comment that got blown out of proportion, and suddenly it was like thousands of people were like, "This person is a disgusting piece of shit. Like, we need to make sure she never, she can never work in this town again." And were pretty persistent with because I had a stat counter. So I could see like the visits to my blog, and I could see like the refreshes from like the same IP like 30 times a day.
Wow.
And would be checking like certain tags, and then be like, what is happening? I feel watched and I don't like it. And it was pretty scary, but it was still like, just fandom. So like if it happened on Substack, it would be even scarier. And I think part of the problem is that there is an entire subset of people that are reading things with the intention of being angry at it. That makes it scary.
That's another of those things that, like, I just kind of don't get. Like, I am very, very liberal with the block and mute button, just because, like, why would I want to engage with, I mean, I guess to a certain degree I do get it, because when I was younger, like, there's something, I mean, it's a dopamine feedback loop. And as it's pretty obvious because that's how they intentionally build these platforms.
Yes.
Anger will get you more engaged, but like for now, like that has I don't know, no appeal to me. But at the same time, or like I did some political stuff when I first started doing it, and I've just kind of moved away from that just because like you said, people will go out of their way to find an offensive way of interpreting it, or it's like, okay, well, if you're completely different than me on the political spectrum, why are you even reading this? Like, are you just looking for a reason to get mad?
I mean, yeah, I think there's like a not insignificant amount of people who do that for whatever reason. Like, I get comments every now and then that are like, "Oh, this is so long, what, whatever," and it's like, okay, well, why? I don't care. Like, there are people who like long form content, like me. I write it for people like me. It's not for you. I don't really care if you found it too long. Like, I'm sorry you have the attention span of a gnat and can't read 20 minutes. Like, whatever, bro. But that's one of those things that does get me, is like, there is just I think that's a non-insignificant amount of people on the internet who are addicted to, like you said, the dopamine rush of being angry or getting like into a, internet fucking slap fight. And it's crazy to me that it's like, it's just wasted energy,
Yeah.
Wasted emotion, time, energy. Like, it's just not worth engaging in.
It's
Well, and to tie this back to fandom, I think a great example of somebody that had this happen to them was, again, I'm sorry I keep going back to it, but it's been in my brain, like Homestuck.
No,
Monia,
keep going back. Come on.
It is literally called the digression sessions. That's why we're here. So.
I think it's great. Talk
that's
more
the
about
point.
Homestuck.
Well, but you were on Tumblr. You had to at least be aware of it adjacently, right?
Yeah.
And like the whole thing is like, that is the perfect example of a guy and his audience who became just bitter fucking enemies. And it's amazing because when it started off, it was interactive, right? He was running it on the MSPA forums and like taking user suggestions to guide the story, name the characters. And it basically blew up overnight. Like, it wasn't like suddenly overnight, it became one of the most popular things on the internet, right? And he was not expecting that. He was not ready for it. And, it just brought in a bunch of bad apples. Like, I always say, the bigger an audience is, the higher quotient of insane people you're going to get just by dint of numbers, proportion.
Absolutely.
And what ended up happening was he got really uncomfortable with it, kind of drew back and gradually reeled back his interactions with the fans. And because there was such a parasocial relationship between him and the audience, it wasn't just it kind of came off to a lot of people, I think, less like, okay, I need space, there are too many of you, I can't handle this right now, I can't respond to every DM, I can't respond to every comment, I can't take every suggestion. And because they had built up this parasocial relationship with him, it was kind of getting a slap in the face from somebody they saw as a friend, and it only embittered them, so they got more hostile, he got more hostile, and it was just this mounting cold war between the audience and the author, to the point that I was convinced for a while that Homestuck was going to end with a big fuck you, like literally just like a middle finger or something, because he had gotten so jaded towards the audience. And I think the only reason he didn't is because he saw it as like a cash cow and was like, well, I have to play along to a degree, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be happy about it. And going back and just revisiting that time, it's amazing that it didn't seem as bitter to me at the time. Maybe it's because I wasn't too involved with like the actual discourse around it and I just liked the comic. But looking back, it's like an abusive relationship, like between him and the fans, where both of them were terrible for each other. And, they're both equally antagonizing each other. And it just goes back to this thing where it's like, this audience is actively hostile to the writer, and it drove him insane. I'm still convinced he's actually crazy these days. And
That's
go ahead.
yeah. I mean, well, it made me think of two different things. One of them's just slipped my mind, but it's kind of similar to, I think, and I meant to bring this up actually in our first conversation, because we talked about, you've seen like the My Brother and Me podcast, right? So they did a D&D podcast called Adventure Zone. And it was a similar thing where like it had a very active and passionate fan base, and it was one of those things where they got a lot of credit for trying to be more inclusive and socially progressive, but it was this weird inverse thing of like, as it went on, like the more inclusive they tried to be, the more it made that crowd angry, because like, you're not doing this type of representation right, and there was like petitions against them, and it was kind of a weird thing, because it's like, three middle-aged white guys and their elderly dad. It's like, well, obviously you're not going to have perfect representation, but it was another one of those things where it just became such a toxic fan base of, to me, like it seems like you can't interact too much directly with the fans because of that, because you're going to because I feel like probably the vast majority of the people, like I only was very peripheral with it. I would like kind of follow it on like Reddit or something, and I stopped because of that. Like the vast majority of people probably didn't care, but you're only getting that like 2% of people who are super, super engaged. And like, I feel like most people like, oh yeah, they're doing their best at this, but it's a comedy D&D podcast, don't read too much into it. But it just seems like such a weird dynamic that I've seen multiple times where like the creator of something will just grow to hate it. And I remember the other example I was thinking about was I randomly, because I'm a musician, I like watching interviews with musicians. The bass player of Weezer did this interview with some fan podcast, and you could tell he was just so fucking pissed off. Like you could tell like he's somebody who loves music but hates being in Weezer, because he's like, they're just like, hey, how do you choose songs for the shows? Yeah, dude, I don't know. The singer picks them all. We don't even record in the same room anymore. We do it over Zoom and send it to each other. And it was like this weird love-hate relationship that starts to exist. Like I feel like that would be very disheartening if I were a creator like that. And your fans are holding you hostage, but also like, because it's like for the guy from Weezer, like he was a session musician who just ended up getting the gig. And it's like, maybe that's not his type of music, but if you gave him, and I like Weezer, okay, they're not my favorite band in the world, but if, between my day job and playing bass for Weezer, yeah, I don't necessarily, even like a band that I didn't like Katy Perry, whatever, if I got to be the bass player for Katy Perry and her touring band, that'd be better than my day job,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think catering to those types of fans is always going to make it worse. It's always going to escalate matters because they will want more and more and more. And simultaneously, it might alienate the people that are not necessarily fully on board. And I'll say this is where we can circle back to the Joss Whedon defense, because if you're saying that the Homestead guy kept going insane and got angry, I feel like this is a case where Joss Whedon actually did well, where he was like, well, fuck you guys. I'm going to keep doing what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's what's fascinating, is because I was about to say, like, Andrew Hussey and the McElroy brothers took two different approaches. Hussey became antagonistic and bitter and was like basically slapping his audience in the face and being like, why are you making me do this? I only do this because you make me. And that kind of thing. So he took one route, and that just pissed a lot of people off. The McElroys tried to appease them, and that pissed them off. And that's a good point, that Whedon took the middle route and just said, I'm going to keep doing what I want, and you can watch it or you don't. And maybe that is just the way to do it, is to just keep on keeping on, because otherwise, when you try to play to your audience, whether you do it in good faith and trying to appease them, or just make them mad because you want to, I guess. Maybe all you can do is write for you. And that's what I've always said, is write for you, write for one audience. If people like it, people like it. If they don't, they don't. But you're never going to please everybody. So there's only one person you can please, and that's yourself. So that's why you should always just focus on writing what you want, or whatever your art of choice is.
Yeah, you're never going to please everyone, and especially these days with the way that fandom is so splintered, you really have such different expectations and perspectives from so many different corners, and they might be equally passionate about what they want, and it is all conflicting. So you have to figure out what is the story you're telling, what is best for the story, in your perspective, and just fucking go for it. And I personally wonder how much the fan antagonism is to do with the sort of decline of transformative fandom, which may also relate to, Ape, what you were saying about the pit and how things are, there's not as much content out there because the fans are relying on the official source to sort of do it their way. And they don't want to have to do stuff for themselves. They want it to be officially sanctioned, done right. I do wonder about that.
That goes to just something I've been thinking about ever since I started writing my publication, because the first couple articles I had were about Star Wars and all this stuff. And I
read those. Yeah, those were good.
Thank you. I mean, I started off, I never quite got to the fandom like I wanted to, but one of the things that got me, and I've been thinking about for a long time, is what was going on in the early 2010s and late 2000s on the internet, that there was just around 2008 to 2012, I think there was just this explosion of fandom creativity that we have not seen again. And it was what was in the zeitgeist that made that happen? And quite frankly, how do we go back to it? Because that was a great time. I really enjoyed it. And I see everything now, and it's just so stagnant and sterile and watered down, and it's just kind of depressing, because it's where did the creatives go? I get it. They were young at the time, most of them, and they probably grew up and have responsibilities. That's probably a factor, but it's why are the younger generations that are getting into this stuff not as creatively robust?
Well, I have thoughts on that, actually. Because to me, it makes me think of, as they say, the medium is the message, right? And I think it has something to do with the fact that at the time, in the 90s, I was too young for it for the most part, but I got online, I think probably 2004, which was way too early, honestly. And being in some fandom spaces, like I said, obscure forums, 4chan, stuff like that, Tumblr, but it was still the internet in general, and this was pre-social media. The degree to which you could call a forum social media is debatable, but pre and post Facebook and pre and post smartphones. These are qualitatively different things that I have noticed, the interactions in the spaces that exist. It was a little bit harder to get to, but it was still fairly accessible. So you had to want to do this, want to get involved in these spaces. And I was kind of thinking you were talking about the Homestuck guy. I believe it's Tim Buckley who did Control Alt Delete, that webcomic.
Oh yeah.
I mean, say what you will about it. I read it a little bit when I was a lot younger, like way back mid to late 2000s. Another thing that hasn't aged particularly well. But this is somebody who did something just because they loved it, and that was monetization was not quite there yet. You could get donations, stuff like that, crowdfunding, but for the most part it was like a smaller space that existed. It was a little bit harder to get to, whereas now like every even Doritos has a social media team, whereas like, and I guess
And a
I'm
movie.
curious, yeah, and a movie, what?
Oh wait, maybe that's Cheetos. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe
that
it's
was
Cheetos. Yeah, but point being, and maybe you can speak to this more, Monia, like it sounds like this was something that existed, that maybe like the writers would pay attention to and maybe take into account earlier, as instead of being like it's a complete feedback loop now. So I mean, that's my take on it, that basically there's a point of diminishing returns when it comes to creative spaces, fan feedback, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so you had asked us to think of topics, and I was like, okay, let's think of how the fandom, how the mode of engagement of fandom has changed for present day. So I feel like this kind of ties into that, where transformative fandom is the one where there's a lot of creative works that comes out of it. And I feel like we've entered into what has been referred to by one writer, forensic fandom. And he used this term to describe Lost and those shows that encouraged fans to sort of dig and find out the truth and, put the puzzle pieces together. And I feel like that is actually how a lot of fans approach their fan objects in general these days. Like, think of, I feel like Swift comes up every single episode. So I'm sorry to bring her up again. But like, if you think of her Swifties, like the people that are like, I need to analyze what this song is about. And like this reference in this lyric is obviously a reference to that lyric from that guy. And it also references that one day in 2014 when they were both wearing that necklace, and that meme of like, I put this together, and it's like, you didn't figure out shit or whatever. That feels like, I've connected the dots. Exactly. It feels like so much of fandom is that these days. The energy is going towards put the puzzle pieces together instead of let's take this and be creative with it. And there is that demand of like, I want it to be affirmed in real life instead of like, yeah, I'm having fun with this here. Like, it's like, no, it has to be confirmed. It has to be real. Let's hound them until they confirm it and make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating take. I haven't heard those terms before, but I really like it. Mostly because, like, I always like the things I liked about fandom is when you take the characters or the story or whatever, and you basically play with them like paper dolls. That's fun. I like that.
Yeah. It's the what was this quote? I went looking for this quote. It's what is the point of being in fan space if I cannot explore like 700 different interpretations of the same character / storyline / dynamic, etc. It's like, yeah, that's what's fun. That's what I like to do when I do shipping stuff. Like, if I ship something, it's not because I want it to happen in the show. It's because, I like the idea of how these two characters, like, in what situation might they actually end up together? What would have to happen for them to develop feelings? Like, how could it happen? Like, sometimes I like crazy crack ships because it's so much fun to sort of figure out, like, is there a universe in which these two characters could come across each other and sort of that dynamic comes out of it? Or you're just messing with like other like friendship dynamics and how those play out, right? That's what's fun to me. Like, it's not, I don't want to see it necessarily in the source material.
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember that me and my friends had a running joke back in the Homestuck days where it started off like literally as an offsided comment where I was like, I bet Carcat would work at KFC if he was a human. And it turned into this whole thing that we had called like KFC Stuck, where it was like, what if all the characters worked awful minimum wage jobs in reality in like Houston or something? And like we talked about that shit for years. It still comes up. Like literally a month ago, my friend was like, hey, remember KFC Stuck? And I was like, yeah, what? And he was like, I don't know, I just thought about it last night. I drove past the KFC and I was like, yeah, I thought about Carcat being at the fucking drive-thru window screaming at somebody.
Yeah. Oh my God.
That does seem to be a common theme I think we're seeing is there needs to be maybe more separation with creators and fans than there is, because it can be too much of a feedback loop when it's directly, when you're getting this direct feedback. It feels like it makes you, I mean, you're self-selecting for people who are like a 2% who over engage. And then I don't, because again, it makes me think of like the Disney era Star Wars, where like the first one they did was basically more or less not a shot for shot, like a beat for beat remake of the A New Hope. And then like they got too much criticism for that, so they did like literally the exact opposite of Empire Strikes Back, like beat for beat, but you go the exact opposite direction. And the third one was just like a complete fucking mess because they were being so reactionary towards it, instead of like, hey, let's maybe take some time to come up with a story here that makes sense and do a couple years between movies and just like be kind of cloistered and sequestered, or even to like, have just a vision and work from it, as opposed to this very reactionary kind of. And especially to that, like, I feel like a lot of writers are, replying to, because they're just very online people, probably replying to the Twitterverse. And this is something I wrote about in my article about the Orville, that I guess there was a YouTuber who had like a couple 100,000 subscribers, not big but not huge, who is like we talked about this, Ape Doom Clock.
Oh yeah, Doomcock.
Yeah, and like they made him a villain in the She-Hulk TV show, and like for me, it's like I have not heard, like they called him something else, but it was obviously that, and it's like, oh, these online misogynist trolls, like I didn't know about any of that. You could have just made a TV show and blocked this person on Twitter, like, because to me that's such a bizarre thing to see, like people trying to like dunk on their Twitter enemies in the TV show. Like just make something good. Don't like nobody knows this besides you, your Twitter followers and your Twitter beefs.
This is definitely something that has been happening early on. I just remembered when you were asking like, oh, were they even paying attention to what fans were saying? I completely blinked on this, even though I've written about it. But Television Without Pity was watched like a hawk and was used by certain shows to sort of change things. Veronica Mars did this infamously. And I think they might have also included some, I don't know if it's them or some other show that also included some.
For example, because I haven't watched it in years, but I loved Veronica Mars at the time when it was coming out.
Did you watch
change
season 2?
I watched a lot of it. It was one of those things again in syndication that like I would watch it and it was on, but.
So one of the most obvious things that isn't like, oh, well, they keep talking about this, so we're going to include it more in the episode, is Tessa Thompson's character, who was introduced in season 2 and was like a bitch. Like that, I feel like that was probably in the script where they're like, this character, the bitch, like, because she was mean, she was awful, and apparently people hated it so much, and they gave her this like 2-episode massive redemption arc where it was like, actually she was a single mom all along, and she really has a great heart and has been treated so poorly by everyone, and now she's an amazing girl, and whatever. Spoiler alert for Veronica Mars. I don't know. Which and I remember watching and being like, this came out of nowhere. Like, where did this come from? There's not a build where it's like, you can tell that it was like meant to be that all along. And then when I found out that they did that because of what the fans and reviewers were saying, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, actually, that why it feels so weird and off. And when they did the movie, like that was essentially just fan service. Like, and I liked the movie, but it was very much like a fan service movie. Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think of the shows that included critics, because I know for sure that has happened. And Taylor Swift has written a song about, I think it's Bob Lefsetz. So there's definitely like, that's a thing. And I'm also like, why do we need this? Like, I don't need to know.
It just feels so lame. Like, this is, maybe it's kind of a dated reference, but there's this Guns N' Roses song called Get in the Ring, where like half of the song is just like Axl Rose calling out like people who are mean to him in like magazine articles, like by name. It's like, he's trying to do this tough macho posturing thing. It's like you're essentially like, calling out in a song people who gossiped about you, and that's so lame. That's so not rock and roll. Like you're already a millionaire rock star. Like why do you care about this? And I saw the same thing with like actors from Marvel shows, like or any there's all this talk about like toxic fans and whatever. Like you're already a millionaire, really successful. Why do you care?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
that's what I would say about it. That's what I always say about J.K. Rowling is like, what are you doing? Like, if I was J.K. Rowling's agent, I would do everything in my fucking power to keep her away from a stable internet connection and a keyboard, because it is like you are one of the wealthiest women on earth, and you choose to spend all of your time bitching on Twitter. Like, if I had your money, you would never hear from me.
She
again.
is literally
I
a
would be
billionaire from writing. Like she was a billionaire and then donated a bunch, and then she became a billionaire again. Like say what you will. I mean, I don't even want to get into the whole like her thing about trans and whatever, but like, lady, you just log off. Like
Yeah.
another writer like that. I don't know if you guys have read King Killer Chronicles, but famously, like the writer Patrick Rothfuss wrote two. They were super well received, and then it's been like 15 years since the last one has been released because he's just always online posting and blogging about, oh, I can't write for this reason, I can't write for this reason, doing like live streams and like berating his fans and getting mad at them for asking him hey, when's the next book's coming out? It's like, well, dude, you're a writer.
That sounds like George R. R. Martin too.
Yeah,
I was going to say.
same thing. Like he will literally, help bring dire wolves back from extinction rather than write a book.
Well, and didn't he put out an article like relatively recently? I think it was like in February, but he basically said like, I can't work on it because Donald Trump, and I'm like upset. And it was like, dude.
Yeah, well, Patrick Rothfuss did that too. Is like, well, for these 4 years, I'm just too upset about Donald Trump, so I can't write. It's like, well, must be fucking nice to be able to. And it's like, oh, guys, the news. I guess I can't do my job. Still give me money though, but.
Yeah, I mean, I remember on January 6th, like when that was happening, me and my coworker were like fucking watching it on my computer with our jaws hanging off our faces, and our boss came in and said like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Fucking watch." Like, are you not in the loop? And he was like, "Oh, well, it's not happening here, so just go back to work." And I was like, "That's a pretty tall fucking order, given what's going on right now."
Yeah, but yeah, I guess. I don't know. Does that feel like a good place to call it, guys? Do you have any other closing thoughts?
Well, I mean, I got one last thing, and this goes back to like why things like what Monia said about transformative fandom versus the forensic fandom. And this is something that I thought about while you guys were talking, or it was an idea that occurred to me. And it's like maybe, and this goes back to what you were saying about how, the internet used to be, there was a higher barrier to entry that kept, I think, certain elements that have become deleterious to the internet as a whole. Like, I firmly believe that the internet was not meant for most people. I just generally do, because it gets clear to me that a lot of people don't know how to handle it. And clearly we as a species have not adapted to this kind of technology, and God knows if we ever will. But maybe part of the reason also there was like this transition is because of the overall transition to the what am I trying to say? A lot of these kids that are getting into the fandom space now grew up in a time where like, YouTube was a thing, right? And they could just sit in front of it and the algorithm would just put video after video after video. And they were like consumers, not creators. They were never encouraged to create. And I know I'm painting with a broad brush and there's exceptions to this, but by and large, like we've fostered a consumer culture, and it's only gotten worse with TikTok, where you can just sit there for hours and scroll through content after content after content. And it's like, maybe people just, that's what they want and that's what they expect, is that because of these short form social media platforms becoming the dominant sort of social media, it's kind of like taken this away, because back in the day, you had to engage with it a little bit more rather than just have it beamed into your eyeballs as you scroll mindlessly through TikTok.
And they get to feel. Sorry, I didn't interrupt.
No. I was going to toss it to you guys and say, like, does that sound like a
I have
solid
thoughts,
idea to
but
you?
go ahead, Monia.
I was just gonna say, and they feel like they're getting access to everything somehow because they think like the small subcultural thing like might pop up in one video and they're like, I know everything about this now, like without ever even engaging in it. Like it's this shallow understanding of everything. I don't know if you guys have read the article Geeks, Mops, and Sociopaths in Subculture Evolution. It's a good piece, and I feel like it kind of illustrates like what happened with the internet. And I know you can't really say the internet was a subculture, but it hosted a lot of subcultures that, yes, went from being deeply nested forums where you had an entire ecosystem that was scraped away into like Tumblr and Twitter, which is like surface level public and can be accessed by everyone suddenly. And LiveJournal was a big part of removing all of those barriers as well, which was not great. The easier it is to co-opt, the harder it is to maintain like a subculture that can actually exist for long enough to even have any type of like impact or ecosystem.
Right. And to tie it back to what we were talking about earlier with like 4chan, I've been working on a piece about the origin of the brownies and how they came to be, period. And they were like a subculture on 4chan amongst an ecosystem of other subcultures that existed beside them that kind of escaped, again, made escape velocity and went crazy. But it's fascinating to me because PJ, you were talking about this, about how like all the forums and all this stuff, it really was like, I always say like, there was a certain point as like things like Reddit, Facebook, Twitter became really big. It was like all these little walled gardens got demolished and everybody was herded into 3 or 4 giant internet ghettos. And I think it's been a horrible for everybody. Disastrous even.
Yeah, I think maybe it does seem to be maybe that's the direction things are going with more like group chats are becoming more and more of a thing, Discord servers, what have you. But kind of on that note, the other thing that it made me think about was like there's no such thing as scarcity anymore, and there's no such thing as obscurity. Because that was something I posted about a little while back is like it was based on your article about Jack Black, because that was one of the best movies that he's in. He's not in that much, sensing a theme here, not unlike Joss Whedon, like rein these people in a little bit. But there are all these. For people who haven't seen the movie, High Fidelity, it's like there's 3 record store snobs essentially, and now like to me like being like a musical snob based on obscurity, like, oh, you like this band, oh, that's so mainstream, like there's no such thing as obscure anymore with the internet. It used to be like back then you would have to like have a physical copy of an album that might have to get imported. You'd have to physically find it. You can't like, order something off the internet. Maybe you could do a catalog if you're really into it. But now like literally pretty much, not anything that's ever been recorded because not everything has been digitized, but a huge portion has been digitized. You can find pretty much anything. And, scarcity creates value, and there's no scarcity. Kind of much in the same way that again, people will like to be derisive about cape shit, as they call it, because there's 4 Marvel movies a year and TV show or Star Wars, what have you, and any of this stuff. It used to be like there was a limited amount of this stuff, and you would have to like create fan fiction or fan art. But now like it's all trivially easy to get, and now especially with AI, you can have endless content of whatever property or whatever style. And I don't know, I feel it makes it just a little bit less valuable, and people, maybe younger people, are less incentivized to create because of that. Because it used to be like if you really liked a TV show, Supernatural, like Metalocalypse was when I was talking about, it was a very small amount of the actual source material that existed, and if you liked it, you'd have to find other people who were into that, and it'd be something obscure in real life, or like a small fandom community. Now like the brand itself is now generally involved with the online fandom, which I don't know, it's kind of like going on when you're a young teenager going on a date when you have a chaperone, your parents are chaperoning it. It kind of changes the dynamic a little bit,
Yes, it really does. It really does. Relatedly, I will say I want to recommend the show The Franchise if you guys haven't seen it, and maybe I'll have to eat my shorts and you guys will watch it and be like, actually, this is garbage. But I thought it was a really good exploration of how these franchises happen and the meddling from behind the scenes where they're like, oh, actually, our the data shows that we need more women, so we're going to change this one to her, and then we're going to do, and you're going to have to stand behind, and just all of this choreographing. So it is very satirical, but not too on the nose. I started The Studio because someone recommended it, and I was like, this feels way too on the nose of oh yeah, diversity, ha 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 ha. And it's like, okay, you're being too direct with it.
Yeah, The Boys was like that initially, but kind of the same thing where they had I think a good satire about I don't want to use the term forced diversity, but the very fake and cynical way that it's used, and it was funny and interesting, but they just doubled down on it. But I mean, I think there's been endless words spilled and podcasts spoken about that particular topic, so you have to dig into it. But I think you get the idea. There's a way you can do it in a way that's tasteful and funny instead of just doubling down way too hard in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Abe?
Oh, no. No, I was just sniffing.
Okay. Man, I almost want to, I'm sad we didn't get to it. I almost want to do a podcast just for Digimon Season 3, because I feel like there is so much there that since you didn't, we touched on it, won't get into the whole thing. But it was, I almost wonder if it was they just heard, oh, this is a big director, let's get him, and didn't look into his work. But it's because it's totally inappropriate for children, really. This children's toy franchise that they made this weird Lovecraftian sci-fi out of. But maybe save that for another day.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, that is one of the most interesting pieces of media I think I've ever seen, just the story behind it. So, I mean, if you want to do a podcast and just jam on it, it would be a weird topic, but it'd be a good one. Let's
put a pin in that, because I could talk for hours about Digimon Season 3, I think, for the same reason. It's a weird one. But in any case, I think that's a good place to end it, guys. Do you have I'll probably release this in a couple weeks, so do you guys have any shout outs, plugs, promotions, anything coming up in the next couple weeks you want to tell people to look out for?
Ape, go ahead.
I mean, I was going to say not really. I mean, I got that big piece on the bronies. Those always do well. People always seem to really enjoy those. So I guess be on the lookout for that. It'll probably come out. And then I'm going to the Great Orientals. I'm going to be on a plane in the Pacific, and you won't hear from me for a while.
I have some pieces that I'm hoping to have published by the time this comes out. So this is going to give me a good kick in the ass to actually do it. But I'm also scheduled to do a Firefly fandom deep dive soon. So for all of the haters, I think this would be very interesting because it goes into the annoying fans, how that fandom really primed fandom of today to be annoying guerrilla marketers and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to end it then. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming. As always, everybody, subscribe to Yakubian Ape and Monia if you're not. But otherwise, thanks for listening, everybody.